Sonic had a rough transition to 3D is the most stupid statement I've ever heard. Sonic's first major entrance into 3D is one of the best Sonic games to date. The designers clearly knew what they were doing when they made the stages in this game, as they closely mimic the stages from the 2D games, or at least the ones that worked for those games. You may not know this, but the early stage we've seen for Sonic Adventure is this variation of Windy Hill created while developing the game. This stage would use multiple paths that would all lead to the next point in the stage, but some would require more skill to get to and maintain. Sound familiar? But this is the design philosophy of the original 3 Sonic games, and it's even echoed by the inclusion of a clear act division such as the tornado that separates Act 1 and Act 2. Most definitely, this is one of their most successful attempts at making a 3D level for Sonic Adventure, which does make me speculate why it was removed. Perhaps the file size was too big and they couldn't allow all the levels to be this big. Perhaps test players in 1998 were too confused to deal with such large areas. Either way, Sonic team had to simplify their designs, scale them down and create levels which are a bit less confusing to navigate. Thus, Emerald Coast. It's not the best level in SA1. I think Red Mountain is much better, but Emerald Coast always stands out to me as the most slept on level when it comes to analyzing the level design of 3D Sonic games. So let's take a look at it. That looks great. Okay, now let's analyze it. So Sonic Adventure isn't the best game at giving you a tutorial. Controlling characters is generally intuitive, but it's true that Emerald Coast has one massive advantage in being able to skip the part where it's teaching players how to play. That honor is taken by Chaos Zero and Tikal. See, if you die too much during bosses, Tikal will show up to tell you tips which include the only two things you'll need to know, how to move and how to homing attack, as well as the general connection your player has with the camera. Chaos Zero's design deliberately makes it clear where Sonic's homing attack will target and if it will damage him, or how Sonic's moveset is limited. It gives Emerald Coast the ability to skip teaching you the controls and focus more on teaching you the general expected flow of the game and your skill set while traversing the level. Finally, I want to talk about this cool little detail. You see, Sonic cannot homing attack towards something that isn't in front of his facing direction, so you're very likely not to know that Sonic can use the homing attack as an extra boost, which Sonic will use after the cutscene where Tails crashes. They want the player to know that this is a viable option, if they pay attention, and are even daring you to try it. There's even an NPC here that tells you to keep holding forward if the view changes, which is certainly easy to miss, but you're likely to figure it out yourself anyways. That out of the way, Emerald Coast starts by dropping Sonic right here. Clear trails of rings to tell Sonic where to go, and many enemies along the level set piece for you to attack, dash through, or be interrupted by. But look behind you! Now, I hope you didn't turn in real life because I'm in the game. There's 3 capsules here for all of us Metroid and DK Country fans. It's a mild reward, but it's not a bad one at all. Sonic then is allowed to walk directly straight through the level and be met with no issues. Yet. The angle he'll hold won't be nice, and most importantly, he won't get any of those enticing extra rings. The start area is probably here to show players how different enemies do different things while allowing them to get used to the camera, which will smoothly follow behind Sonic consistently. Basically, holding forward is good. But striving to get extra things like rings and enemies is even better. You can even go to this side aisle for more rings, which was deliberately placed here to hint players into not being afraid of shallow water. Your first obstacle in the way will definitely be either this green enemy here or this monkey here, which stand directly in your path. You might kill them or skip them, but eventually you'll attack an enemy to see they release a Jamative collectible Flicky. Snoop it up and you won't know what to do with it ever, because this video is not about the Chao Garden. If you manage to avoid the monkey on this ramp, some dolphins will greet you as you bounce all over the place using the first bounce spots you'll encounter, where you'll see that these are either going to kick you into another one of them, or allow you to continue with a big speed boost. Afterwards, you're likely to ram into these ropes that will continue to bounce you if you don't stop pressing forward. Kinda a bit of tough love, because this is the game's way of telling you that these automated sections won't last forever. If they were just rails, you just stop in your tracks, where you might not notice this is your fault. I've seen some people say that these are here to show how Sonic speed makes things react differently, but very few things in Sonic Adventure actually change based on Sonic speed, so I think that wasn't the intention of these. These were probably more so a way to make it extremely evident that it's not okay to just continue walking forward all the time. You probably gave 2 turns and continued on your way, but there are more impatient players that took a leap of faith and had results that weren't quite as cool as that scene in Spider-Verse. They fell to the island below. This island is fairly simple. The camera aims at your destination and the spinning spike ball will require some thinking for the player to avoid. It's true that the devs left some mean rings nearby, however, probably simply out of spite. After coming out of the beach pit or the springy woodwalk, you'll encounter a speed ramp into a loop-de-loop. And away you go! But Remember the ramp that got you into this mess in the first place? Well, as it turns out, slants are absolutely stacked in this game. They are so muscular you can ask him to open the pickle jar, and if Sonic rolls on them and then jumps, he can get massive boosts that allow him to skip massive portions of the level, like here, where I skipped easily 10 seconds by simply doing this. I'll call these speedrunner speeds when I bring them up in the future. Coming along the beach, you'll encounter your first checkpoint and a clear path towards continuation. Curious players will take a look at the surrounding area to find extra rings behind the island and a seemingly useless plot of land. Little do they know, it has a purpose that is not meant for them yet. So let's skip it for now. Suppose you just follow the path into the speed ramp, you'll be boosted towards your first mandatory checkpoint. It's easy to miss the first one, but this one is basically unavoidable unless you're unlucky or know what you're doing. This is because the game expects you to die soon with the first challenge in the game where the enemy is yourself. Dashing through some rings and up a ramp, you'll see a booby trap. You can take the chance and boost through or wait. Well, how do you like to play? Are you gonna dash through with Sonic speed or take your time? And here we are. This infamous location, known for being basically the pitfall all YouTubers crash into, because Sonic Adventure DX is a bad port. You see, Sonic Adventure DX's collision system is based on the Sonic Adventure 2 collision system, which means it was designed for a different geometry. I think the game here attempts to push Sonic forward as part of the automatic section, but the collision system detects a high-speed Sonic crashing into this wall, where it inverts Sonic's momentum, which results in him falling out of bounds. But this issue isn't even here on the Dreamcast version. How crazy! It is literally a botched sport job. And then this loopty. Remember the kid who told you to just hold forward? You don't, probably because you didn't talk to him. So it might be extremely weird for players that they don't have to move their analog stick in circles, which is probably why falling off this loop is particularly trendy. It's when players figure out to just hold forward during automated sections. Most players are not aware of this the first time around, so they will probably fail here, which is why this skip is so infamous. Honestly, I think this isn't that big of a deal because it's meant to show you something, so next time you say this game is bad, consider how wrong you are, the mistakes you made along the way, and how many bugs from other games from 1998 are considerably more game-breaking. Speedrunner speed. This island goes up and down and all around, so if you're a smarty pants like I, you can actually skip this section entirely by spin dash jumping off this ledge. It's a bit tricky, but you can skip over to the whale section in no time. So yes, there's a whale in this game that will chase you while smashing up a pier. But any player paying attention will notice these rings back here before the waving bridge. Little do they know that picking up these rings is going to make it harder for them to pick up the rings suspended above the bridge, where if you manage to time it right, you can pick them up simply by running into them. And off you go! The wall will begin chasing you and attempt to murder you, and all you have to do is hold any direction and you'll be fine unless you're spin dashing, then the wall will ram into you for being an impatient weirdo. After a bit, Sonic will land on this island with a clear path forward, as indicated by the rings. Rebel Minds will go around to find even more extra rings, a lot of them, but even more Rebel Minds will notice the shape of this structure allows them to naturally ramp themselves up the mountain and away. Normal people will manage to either wait or swerve to avoid the spiky trap and continue onwards by using these springs. You can even take a detour for a slight speed increase as well as a 1-up if you can continue to homing attack through. This is the first time the game will ask you to make consecutive homing attacks, so if you didn't attempt to homing attack everything at the start of the stage to notice you can link these together, then this should be a great alternative indicator. You might notice that the bridge towards the lighthouse has gaps, so you can jump like an idiot or dash through like an absolute Chad, which will actually give you enough speed to prevent crashing into the lighthouse with a well-timed jump. This is one of my favorite examples of how Sonic in 3D is different from Sonic in 2D, because you have so much more freedom with how you interact with the path below, being able to pull off many times by simply aiming your movement correctly. So before Sonic moves into Act 2, you will notice this cheeky monkey here, which you shouldn't try to attack because it will end badly for you. I think this is the game's way of showing you that attacking all the enemies is a great idea in case you've been doing that. Many people probably did that with Mario and stuff, but over here it is generally best to avoid all enemies because it would mean you are losing time with them. Basically just skip this monkey, he's an ass anyways. Finally, you'll move into Act 2, where the game will show you one of the first instances of the multiple path level design structure. You see, Emerald Coast shows 3 of the level design types in Sonic Adventure: linear, branched, and open world, as well as some things that are more in between of those. We already went through the linear example right at the start, then had several small open world parts for you to dig into. Now it's time to show the branched paths. The first being very clear: if you can point properly and follow these wings up a wall, you'll get speed shoes and challenge with the hardest part of the game yet: threading the needle through here. If you fail, not only is this monkey going to make sure you feel bad about it, but you're also going to have to take the slower path, bucko. This wall is interesting, because its natural curve and the constant rings plastered on it are sure to make most players notice that yes, Sonic can run on walls if he is running fast enough. The upper path is straightforward. A boost path will lead you through some bumpers and feed you into the next checkpoint. If you're going fast enough, the camera won't even have time to catch up. The lower path is more dangerous and roundabout. You'll first have to platform over these floating rocks upon this lake, which thankfully you can skip a little with the help of these badniks that can boost you efficiently. You can also walk slowly under the lake, if you're silly like that. It's made clear here that water slows down Sonic, if you haven't figured it out yet, which you very well might have not if you ignored all the signs and played well enough. This is important for later. Afterwards, you'll have to jump and swerve to avoid all the obstacles coming your way. Spike traps, monkeys, and stairways that will eventually allow you to arrive at the checkpoint. Notice here that going fast and being reactive to the level design has massive advantages in saving time. This is one of the longer sections in the game that serve as punishment for failing to notice and take the higher and faster routes. Clearly, the designer is making it as clear to you as possible that you shouldn't mess with them. They have a gun. The checkpoint will continue into the drop where the path curves. In case you didn't notice, Sonic can run on walls when he's going fast enough. You probably will do now. I like that this mechanic was introduced before, yet skippable, but now it's obligatory. It's an unusual bit of game design where sharper players are naturally rewarded, but all players get to learn the same information in due time, and this is done consistently throughout the stage. So if you continue through the wall, you'll do a cool loop-de-loop that is also slow as crap. You might want to think next time to go through this shallow water with rings and hop behind the loop. But if water slows you down, then the best idea is to skip the water almost entirely, thus achieving the speed. Shooting off into the next island, you'll get this cool mountain ramp thing which leads you up a path to another island with a massive drop after some challenges, followed through to land on the grass again, where the magic ball that explains stuff will explain how to use jump panels, because it's not intuitive. Heads up that this is a branching path section. This tutorial explanation may throw you off, but the area surrounding here has several equally fast routes. Below this ramp there's a one-up, there's springs here to the side, and you can jump from the first island to the second island with a simple jump off this ramp. Or alternatively, speedrunner speed. You can jump from the side of the loop-de-loop onto the first island, and if you remain on the edges, the one-sided invisible wall won't cage you in, which means you can jump all the way to the third island in true fashion Sonic speed. After some attempts, that is. This way you can skip the entire segment almost. The final segment of this level is very linear and flashy. Just run straight. If you do that, you'll be fine. I mean, do avoid these falling spike drops, which you can go completely around of, but besides that, you're home free to rescue your buddy Tails. I actually really like the parasol placements here. The first area has these colorful parasols and chairs that look like a place for a guest at the hotel to stay in. But there's surprisingly no other parasols besides the ones around the area with the jump pads, as well as the ones here at the end of the level. These look more sturdy. It makes it seem like some people take a private boat to these places in the beach to hang around further away from the hotel. I just wish we'd actually get to see some boats as well. In fact, a lot of these levels' aesthetics seem pretty interesting for any level. Like, the beach theme isn't unusual, but this is the first time we saw a 3D world in Sonic that didn't look like the designer's soul was fighting to stay in their body. The crazy loops and weird structures make this into one of the most unique beach levels out there back in the time. Something which Sonic would continue to improve until we got the amazingly beautiful aesthetics of Ocean Palace. But that's not all. You get to revisit many places in Sonic Adventure, as many characters cross through the areas at different points in the story. This is when these pointless plots of land that you saw multiple times start to get meaning. When you play as Big, you get this expanded version of the lighthouse area, where Tikal will alert you of both Froggy's position and the existence of a secret cave with some heavy fish. The Gamma version of this stage is simply the start of the Sonic stage, roughly the first 12 seconds of Sonic's level if you're moving quickly, like look at this, where your objective will be right here on this plot of land that used to be useless. It now makes a lot more sense, and you can rest happy to know the detail you thought was weird before has a purpose. I'd personally like it if Gamma stage was extended further, because it's far too short. Heck, I even got a mod here with some interesting level design to it that does that. I mean, mod gives us a great idea about some improvements one could make to the level, as the best stages in this game are those that combine the multiple pathing and open world design styles. Many of these linear areas could have been more interesting if you had just more paths to choose, though I don't believe the Sonic team made a mistake in scaling down the amount of multipaths, particularly not on the first stage. Having too many paths would be pointless if players just found the faster one, and you have no reason to ever take the lower paths if you're trying to get a good score for additional emblems. In the 2D games, you'd had to start from the very beginning of the game every time you wanted to play it, so doing multiple paths helped increase variety, make a more satisfying learning curve, and increase replayability, whereas here you'd simply restart your stage run instead of taking the detour with no consequences at all. You wouldn't even visit all of the paths since you know the path furthest down in the distance is objectively worse every single time, and you can clearly see this in the old Windy Valley stage. Heck, Sonic Adventure 2 never really returns to this multipath approach because of this, and I believe SA1 made a good choice in keeping these multipath segments less common and smaller, make it traversal matter more than taking the most efficient route every time. So next time you think that Sonic had a bad transition to 3D, think about how carefully the designers adapted their game design to work on a 3D environment, made one of the most complex physics and lighting systems in 1998, and how the first stage you ever got to play as modern Sonic has little to no design flaws, putting in the player's hands the means to predict the game mechanics before the game does any formal explanations. It really accentuates the ideas of freedom that were imbued into Sonic's personality at the time, and when the first stage of a game works in tandem with the player, the game mechanics, and the way it is all going to be presented, you can't help but think that they did a pretty good job when making Emerald Coast. Yes. So how many times did I start sounding like a homeless version of Zoomzike in this video?